human organism, the subtle body or the psychic body is compounded of different channels or energies called channels of energy called nadi or tsa in Tibetan. The traditional number of these in the ideal structure is 72,000. Most of these are held to terminate in certain configurations which are closely related with the potential for vocal expression. In Sanskrit alphabet of 16 vowels and 30 consonants is considered to be the most accurate model on a level of human language, or what is taking place on the level of the subtle channels. The reason why such a range of vocal expression and communication is possible for human beings, the reason that we can give rise to such an enormous variety of sounds is that we can express and understand, is because of the configurations that exists in the subtle level of the nadis. In the other forms of life, this complexity of structure on a psychophysical level does not exist. This is why animals such as dogs, cats, sheep and so on have a very limited range of vocal expression. They can make a few sounds, but that's all. They don't have this wide range of vocal expression and communication that human beings have, because their psychophysical structure is that much simpler and less sophisticated. Now, the vocal expression is not simply a mechanical process. It is not simply due to the fact that the nadis are shaped in a certain way that human beings has the potential for communication. It is also connected with the intelligence of a human being. The physical form of any physically embodied being, human or otherwise, can be seen to be composed of 5 elements: earth, water, fire and space. In the case of the human beings, there is the 6th mental element termed transcending awareness. The nature of mind as transcending awareness is a little bit closer to the surface, a little bit closer to the level of consciousness experienced in the human being than in any other form of life. That is what is known as the 6th element of the Vajra body. In the Tantric text, the human form is referred to as the Vajra body because it is endowed with the 6 elements, and most significant of which is the 6th, that of transcending awareness. It is this that also permits a human being to have the capacity to communicate, to express on a vocal level. We can see the 6th element of transcending awareness in operation when we speak, when we have the capacity to express ourselves in so many different ways and on such a level of sophistication and complexity. Also when we can be understood and in turn understand what we might receive from others. There is not only the ability to merely hear and understand the sense of words, but to perceive deeper states of meaning and to reflect and act upon them. All of this is due to the operation of the 6th element of transcending awareness. Given that we have this relatively sophisticated intelligence, it is still impossible for the ordinary person to create a mantra, to come up with something that has the same beneficial effect as mantra. For example, consider even the mind of a person who has attained the first level of the bodhisattva realization, the first bhumi known as the total joy. At this level, the mind of the individual becomes freed from individuality to the point that it can express itself far more freely. There are what are known as the 12 qualities, or 1200s, because the mind can maintain 100 states of samadhi in a single instant without any conflict or contradiction. It can express itself 100 different emanations at a single time. It is capable of working directly for the benefit of 100 sentient beings in an instant. It is capable of recalling 100 former and foreseeing 100 future states of rebirths. It is capable of experiencing 100 pure realms, encountering 100 Buddhas, receiving teaching in 100 different ways in a single instant. But even on that level of realization of the first bhumi, that the mind is incapable of creating a mantra that will have the same effect as a mantra which comes from a truly enlightened source of being. Is this interesting? Now as the mind continues to develop through the different bhumis or levels of bodhisattva realization, from first to second, second to third, third to fourth, and so on, these qualities become increased by the power of 10. By powers of 10, no? The mind becomes more and more free, more and more capable of expressing itself in these different ways, to the point where on the 7th level of the bodhisattva realization, the mind attains a state where it is no longer subject to emotional confusion. This particular limiting or inhibiting factor of the kleshas or conflicting emotions is eliminated. But even still the mind is incapable at that point of giving rise to a mantra in the true sense of the word. The 8th, 9th and the 10th levels of the bodhisattva realization see yet further increase and manifold expression of these different qualities of the mind. As well, however, beginning with the 8th level, certain forms of control over different aspects of experience begins to set in. For example, over the length of life, over merit, over wealth, and in particular over communication, and the definitive nature of sound and language's communication. It is at this point then that a being who has attained at least the 8th level of bodhisattva realization becomes capable of, in a certain sense, creating mantra, of creating or giving rise to a sound which has the effect that a mantra is intended to have. The Vajra-like Samadhi, which represents the transition from the 10th bhumi to the full and complete enlightenment, is the final transcendence of all limitations of mind. This is the attainment of enlightenment, which is sometimes referred to as the 11th bhumi, the level of the Buddhahood or complete enlightenment, where the mind is totally free of all limiting factors whatsoever and has an infinite capacity to express itself in any way, and it has omniscience, as spiritual power, and so forth. At that point, there is no longer any block or obstacle towards the transmission of something like a mantra in any one of its forms. Dharanis, that is the long mantras, or mantras which are designed to cultivate states of awareness, or so on. All of these rise or can rise from a fully enlightened Buddha's experience. Are you okay, or do you want me to stop? Continue or stop? What? It is on these 3 higher levels of bodhisattva's development it is on these 3 higher levels of the bodhisattva's development. You see, bodhisattva is someone who is evolving. Buddha is someone who is already finished. You see? You understand? That's the difference between bodhisattva and Buddha. So that's why it's called bodhisattva, is someone who's journeying on the path but who doesn't go back. Who doesn't, how do you say? Regress, yeah. Then you're not a bodhisattva, really. Just got it by fluke. Okay. It is on these 3 higher levels of the bodhisattva's development, in the 8th, 9th and 10th levels, and the level of complete enlightenment of Buddha, that the creation or the transmission mantra becomes possible. At that point, the mantra which rises from the state of panoramic awareness of samsara and nirvana, the roar of sound, of vibration, of communication that rises from the entire spectrum of experience, when transmitted by the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas on that level, becomes a very powerful spiritual tool. Since there is that awareness behind the mantra, it is presented in such a way that it is perfectly effective for purifying the individual who comes into contact with it of specific levels of confusion and obscurations in the mind, whether states of emotional confusion or ignorance and so forth, and of instilling in the individual the realization of the true nature of mind as the actualization of the potential which already exists as the Tatha Garbhata, Tatha Gata Garbha, or the Buddha nature. At that point, then, because the origin of mantra is authentic, the mantra becomes an effective spiritual tool. This is something which is attested to in the writings which derive from the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, that effective mantras are those which rise from this authentic level of enlightened experience. In the teaching of Lord Buddha Shakyamuni, the Tantric Master Padmasambhava, we find again and again the reference to the 6-syllable mantra Om Mani Padme Hum and, for example, Om Ahom Bhanjang Gurpe Master. These are two common mantras in Tibet. Om Mani Padme Hum. The 6-syllable, I've explained the 6-syllable Om Bhanjang Gurpe. Now the Om Mani Padme Hum. The 6-syllable of this mantra Om Mani Padme Hum are endowed with the spiritual power to eliminate karmic factors which bring about rebirth in the 6 realms of samsaric existence, and to cut off its kind, the 6 poisons like the anger, desire and so on, which cause the rebirth, to kind of purify it, you see. So which bring about the rebirth in the 6 realms of samsaric existence. They have the ability to counteract the effects of 6 primary emotions in the mind of the individual, the emotions of desire, attachment, aversion, stupidity, mental opacity, pride, jealousy, envy, greed and avarice. The syllable mantra imbued, no? Yeah? Imbued with the power which counteracts the effects of these mental poisons as deluding and confusing factors in the mind, and presents the possibility of transforming these emotions into different aspects of transcendent awareness. Thus, energy that manifests in mind is experienced in this pure way rather than in its impure and confused way. The 6 syllables are related with the 6 perfections or the 6 paramitas of the Mahayana path, and the merit that accrues from the recitation of 6 mantras is identical to which accrues, no? How do you pronounce it? Accrues to the practice of 6 paramitas and so on. This is something one can find attested throughout the writings which are scriptural basis deriving from the teachings of the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni and Guru Padmasambhava. There is one story often told to illustrate the benefits of merely the recitation of mantra without any particular thought behind what is being done on any spiritual level. This is the story of a demoness in India, an extremely fearsome creation who was plagued by a karmic affliction of always being in the state of starvation and having to satisfy this insatiable hunger by continually slaughtering living beings and drinking their blood and eating their flesh while still alive, to eat them alive. The demoness was therefore creating incredible harm for herself and others. At a certain point there appeared double E Appear as an emanation of Chenresi, the Bodhisattva of compassion, a demon, a similar creature, but a male of the species, so to speak. And these two mated. As the demoness continued her evil ways, she would hear the demon reciting over and over again, Om Mani Padme, Om Mani Padme, Om Mani Padme, and she became quite curious and said, what are you doing that over and over? That for? You seem to spend a lot of your time doing that. What possible use is it? The demon, that she asked. The demon replied, well, I have found that whenever I am hungry, if I recite the mantra, the hunger disappears. It satisfies my hunger. So she thought to herself, that sounds like just what I need. So she began to recite this mantra with the temporary effect that her hunger was squashed, and she was no longer subject to such cravings of hungers and pang, following which she slowly began to develop some compassion, more compassion and empathy towards the beings that she had formerly been killing, and began to appreciate something of the nature of emptiness. She was then actually able to develop on the path to enlightenment. Now all that began because of the simple verbal recitation of mantra without any idea of its spiritual significance. There is a particular sutra in the Tibetan canon, Kondo Samato, which is a teaching of the Buddha on the use of mantra and the benefits of this kind of technique.